Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday book study. You are the happiness you seek, and welcome everyone that is new and also coming back. We are looking at chapter 10, A Belief in Separation, and I'm very happy to be co-hosting this with Rose Johnston. Hi, Rose.
Hi, Bill and everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome. So happy to have you here. And for those of you that don't know Rose, she is in some of our other, she's in Evolve community. She is in Living in Oneness community, and that content course that Lisa and I produced just about 2 years ago. And she loves Rupert Spira and the book study. She's a longtime Course in Miracles student, but we're loving, a lot of you guys are course students that I've sort of brought into the Rupert Spira world. And I'm grateful that you're enjoying and understanding and loving this content as much as I do and did before I started bringing it into the Teachers of God Foundation. And we're just real happy to have been invited by Rupert to share from his book. He is invaluable to my understanding and awakening. I needed that peace, and it's so great to have these words laid out the way Rupert speaks and points. It's so precise. And I was just speaking with Rose before we went live that, it's like we hear it from one source and then we hear it from another source, and it comes in through a filter that it can't deny the truth. And Rupert speaks it in such a beautiful way that we all just, we're just like breadcrumbs, taking it in one bite at a time. And sometimes we just want to eat the whole loaf of bread, I guess. So welcome, Rose, and thank you for being here. And everyone is, there's a few people welcoming you on the chat. And we'll get started in the chapter. It's a shorter chapter. We'll look at your comments in the chat after a few minutes. And Rose, we're on page 77. The title, Belief in Separation. What would you like to highlight on this page?
Well, this was a really important chapter for me. Of course, I read it as soon as I got this chapter, and it was so my chapter because the belief in separation is equated here with the belief in the body. And that's been my key lesson, big time, long time chronic illness and always body stuff. So this chapter is really important to me. So it's a real gift. And what the very first thing, a belief in separation. So what I did, Bill, if I could, I went to the dictionary on the definition of belief, because that always helps me. And the definition said, belief is an acceptance that a statement is true or that someone or something exists. It's also trust, faith, or confidence in someone or something. So we accept this belief, we put our trust in this belief, our faith in this belief. And this chapter is about undoing that, about undoing and putting our trust in a belief in separation. And so Rupert is really it's a brilliant chapter in his analogy with space. And the other, for me, the key thing that stood out is the very first sentence where he says the ego or separate self could be defined as the identification of our self awareness with the content of experience, or the mixture of awareness with the limited qualities of the mind and body. So he repeats that definition throughout this chapter, that we really get that our awareness has identified. And the key word for me that comes throughout the chapter that related to me was the word identification. So I looked up that word, and it's to establish or indicate who or what someone or something is. So this identification, we're saying this is who I am. And if we have a belief that we're separate, we have an identity. So those two words really go together, our identity and our belief. So I would start with that, Bill. How about you?
No, those are really great points, Rose. Thank you. I also underlined the word belief. And the reason I love Rupert's clarity around letting go of belief is because, you know, I don't know about everyone here, but I know a lot of us, I wouldn't even say most of us, a lot of us would say when we were kids, or maybe before we get into these spiritual teachings, that you heard the phrase, do you believe in God? Or do you believe this, or you do believe that? And it's one thing to believe it, but it's a whole other thing to know it. And the big distinction between belief and knowing is that it's one thing to believe that these words are true, but it's another whole matter to know that they're true at the level of awareness, of the identity of self-awareness. When it dawns on you, it's not something that you believe. It's something that you know. This something that's prior to identity, this something that's prior to name, which was, everyone here has been named as a little baby. And prior to that, there's still that something that was there and is still here. It's still there in the same essence. And every one, and I'm not speaking to a bodysuit person when I say that, everyone knows that they know. Everyone knows that they are aware. And that's a knowing, it's not a belief. So I like that, and this came from Rupert. This comes from directly from his teaching. So I like the distinction of going from belief to knowing.
Yes.
And I also like what you said about identity, because, we have this fixed belief that we are this.
Yeah.
We have this fixed belief that, when someone says you, no matter if it's me saying you, or your one of your children, or a book that says you, the you that it's speaking to is likely the person. But on a spiritual level, a lot of the time, the you that it's speaking to is not the person at all. And we're taking it in as if we're the person, we're the body mind, the separate self that thinks it's the you. So anyway, I thought those were good points. Let's look at the question. It says, this is the question that was obvious in a retreat or a Q&A with Rupert. It says, if our essential nature is ever present and unlimited awareness, what is the ego or the separate self, and how does it arise? I mean, that's a great question. I've heard it a dozen times. I wouldn't say a million times, but a dozen times. Really great question. How does the ego happen? And then Rupert goes on to say, gives that explanation to that. The ego, and I've often heard him say the seeming separate self, could be defined as the identification of ourself. It's identification of ourself awareness with the content of experience, or as you just said, Rose, with the mixture of awareness with the limited qualities of the mind and body. So, he's starting off saying, helping us to see that because we were identified as this, we've identified the essential self with everything that we were raised to think that we are.
Yeah.
A man, a woman, boy, girl, and then all of the other characteristics that have, what we do, our role, all of those things were added to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he goes on and says, in the next chapter, we'll explore how awareness seems to acquire the limitations of the mind, which in this context, I refer to mainly as thoughts, feelings. And in this chapter, we will explore how awareness seems to be defined by, contained within, and limited to the body. So I mean, he just makes it very simple, very, very clean. And like you, I mean, everyone here is, I'm fascinated with what he did in the next few pages with the space in the room and how he related that. I haven't heard it expressed in this way before. And so we're getting more of Rupert's fresh metaphors and examples so that we can, if you didn't see it this way, turn it over this way and upside down and see what it looks like another way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else did you see on this page that you would like to highlight?
Well, I loved how you said, that awareness is prior to what we mix it up with the objects, and in this case, the body. How do we take awareness, and now we're a body. We're not awareness, we're a body. And so his analogy, I love this because he's giving us something we all can relate to. The physical body seems very physical, and he says it actually, if you inquire more, the body is actually not physical like the mind. But he said, let's start there with the analogy of a physical space. And so he's using this space to give us something concrete. Like, I think this is a brilliant, as Bill said, his analogy here of absolutely, we all can relate to the physical space in a room and in the universe. So he says, imagine that physical space of the universe before anything is in it, the galaxies, planets, stars. It's vast and it's borderless and empty. Now,
where are you? What page are you on?
On the bottom of 77, the first page.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a vast, borderless, empty space, the last paragraph.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And now he's saying to imagine, you add the quality, not just vast, borderless, and empty, but it's a knowing space. So he's really helping us here to start to know the quality of ourself as aware and vast and borderless. So he's, the physical universe is a really great metaphor. To us, it's like borderless and vast, but it's aware. So that's what stood out for me on that page, Bill.
Yeah. I also like, in that description, using the vastness of space and also galaxies and cosmos, and to realize that awareness is that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
That's a really big wow. That's because the same awareness that is aware of this experience prior to labels, just awareness is.
Yes.
There's no labels, there's no vibration. There just is, right? That's the same awareness. I mean, that's the same as the space in the galaxies. prior to Big Bang. That's this. That's awareness prior to names, labels, or content. That really blows my mind. So let's turn the page. And there's a question with Andrew. I see that Amy and Rick said something to Andrew, and also I want to say Rick he's hot today. Rick, you're hot today. All beliefs are subtle forms of separation. It's just a matter of degree. Yes. Thank you for that. And Rick is our big commentary today. So if you have time, you can follow his comments. He's usually right on. And Andrew says, does awareness seems to be limited only by the mind, but also the body? Well, awareness isn't limited by. Awareness allows a limitation of itself, or it allows itself to be limited. It's not limited by these experiences. It allows itself, what Rupert says is, the way he says it is, it divests or it limits itself in the experience. It never changes, but there's a seeming limitation that it places on itself, because awareness is all there is. And we'll talk more on that next week when we talk about there is only I think next week there is only one thing. I forget the name of the title. But Jenny and we covered this for a year. Every month we covered it for a full year. There's only one self. There's only awareness. There's not something else. Let me see if I can see next week's title is there. Yeah, there's only one self. And that one self is awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think Amy said, answered, and so did Rick. Thank you. And Rana too. Oh, Rana reminds me of no less than the trees and the stars, Desiderata. Caution, there is no specific how or when liberation or clearing seeing actually happens. This is from Rick at 1217. It's actually a very non-happening, or I can't spell that, something at best. There are countless stories out there describing this as some type of event in time. Take such stories with a grain of salt. All these stories are personal, but irrelevant. Thank you, Rick, for that. And let's keep going on page 78. What else do you see on 78, Rose?
Well, the top two paragraphs that finish the thought in the previous page, that again, he's describing this physical space, and we can see that he's describing us as awareness, how there's, prior to objects in it, by itself, it's nothing there, there's nothing there, it's pure objectless, and there's nothing to know or perceive. So because there's nothing there, it's devoid of any content or objectivity. It knows itself. And this is a key concept of Rupert's, and really one to take in terms of who are we? We as awareness know ourself by ourselves. There's no subject object. In the next paragraph, the second paragraph, he says that the aware physical space knowledge of itself does not take place in subject object, this is so strange for us in our dual experience, because it is a dual experience. And to have an experience that is not subject-object relationship is a totally, he says, unique experience. And this is important. It's the only experience. That's major understanding. Of all our multiple thousands of experiences, they're all subject-object. And this one of awareness is not. It's so in the middle of the second paragraph, its knowledge of itself is as such unique. It knows itself just by being itself. In the same way that the sun illuminates itself simply by being itself. In this case, that which knows is that which is known, without any separate subject that knows any object that is known. So for me, this is vitally important. And it's like my mind, the mind part, and my years and lifetimes of experience of subject objects, like this is like, wow, if I, that. And of course, as we learn from Rupert, it's totally colorless. So it's like, that's why we don't see it, because there's no subject object. So it's totally unique. So that to me was very significant.
Yes. Yeah. And it is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's probably the biggest statement you could make, because I had a conversation with Lisa, not on this chapter, but we were just talking about God. That we used to think there was and that we had this after dinner conversation last night, and we used to think that there was everything was a God, the rain God, the tree God, the sun God. We used to think everything was God, and now if someone says, "Oh, did you check in with the rain God today to see if it's going to rain?" People would say, "Well, that's stupid." Well, 1,000 years ago, it wasn't. and today, still, people are believing that, I only want God's will. Well, that's another problem. And maybe in 100 years, people will say, "Well, that's a stupid thing. What do you mean you want God's will? You just rest as present." Who knows where we'll be with this understanding at that time? But it used to be that all the many gods were pretty true, and you could be killed for saying otherwise. Mm-hmm. And now we don't even it would be ridiculous to say, "Well, I wonder if the sun god is going to be on my side today," right? Mm-hmm. But for us to go to what Rupert just said, that there's a subject, that we are the subject, that awareness is the subject, and there is no object. And that's prior to the Big Bang theory. So it's the same. It's like, and I think, doesn't it say here in this chapter? Doesn't he use the term billions of years?
Yes, that's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's coming up. So I love the profound statement that's being made here in the pointing that this awareness, the simplicity of being aware, is equal to prior to planets. It's equal to, it's prior to anything, and it's still now. Right? That's crazy. Crazy good. Okay. I simply am. What do you have to say about that, Rose?
Well, this is what Rupert does now, is have a conversation with this aware space and ask it questions. And as we look at this, it's interesting that he's teaching us, in my opinion, how to do, he's doing self-inquiry. He's asking this aware physical space about itself. So these are pointers for us how to do self-inquiry, because he has 4 principal questions that he asks. And I've been using these 4 principal questions to do self-inquiry about who I am. So they're very helpful pointers here. And the first question he asked is, what would you call yourself? What a great question. What do you call yourself, Rose? Well, no, I. And he says, I is the name that anything that knows itself gives to itself. It is for this reason that everyone refers to their self as I. And I found this, and I've heard him say this before, and when I contemplated this, it was really important for me to understand how I feel about me is essentially how you, Bill, and everyone here, and everyone and everything feels this I essence. I think I feel and think, that my essence feels different than others. But really deep down, we all are having the same primordial experience of I. So I found
but the one that has characteristics is not the true I.
Yes, that's right.
The one that has distinctions, characteristics, or even the observer is not the true I.
You're right.
Because the true I is not an I, it's an is, and even that's too many words.
Right.
It's just an is prior to vibration, it's the thing that Rupert was describing above. It's that stillness. That's why stillness and meditation brings us to that essence of I am, or as soon as we put a word on it, we're adding to what has no words and can't be described.
Yeah, I just want to say your teaching about that pause that you teach, Bill, is continuously, as I learn the power in what you just said, in returning to that absolute stillness that is our essential nature, that doesn't even have an I or a you. It's no sense of I. It's just, as you called it, the isness. So that resting, that quiet is profound. So it's a great pointer you've given us. So he goes on to say, we now ask the aware space of its primary experience of itself, I simply am, it replies, and it's a self-evident fact of experience. The knowledge I am refers to the aware physical space knowledge of itself before it is qualified by any other experience. At this stage, there is nothing in itself other than itself. The knowledge I am is the totality of its experience. There is only its awareness of being. And again, for me, in terms of, and I think Rupert is constantly having us go back to just this awareness without mixing ourselves with the contents, the body, the sensations, thoughts, the feelings, the perceptions, just that pure, that we're only aware. We've taken our awareness out of there and just returned it to the pure presence, isness, I. So to me, that was really a very important pointer again.
Yeah. Yes, and he is, as you said, he's one by one. He's giving us the self inquiry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then he goes on for this self inquiry, and there's 4 questions that we now ask the aware physical space. So this is getting, if this experience, if it experiences any limitation or division within itself. So that's the first, and that's the first question we could ask ourselves as awareness. Is there any limitation? And when I did this with Rupert the first time, I was astounded. It's like you went in and you asked awareness, and it was like, wow, you just instantaneously know there's no limitations. And there's no divisions. It's like, it, like Bill was saying earlier. So, it does not even understand the word limitation or division, and it remains silent. So then it goes on to the second inquiry, and this is about qualities of shape, size, age, gender, location, weight, boundary, and
Yes.
again, silence. So we can ask ourselves, and Bill, I've heard you often do this with us, and it is a profound way to get to that place of awareness. Just like when I'm sitting in awareness, I often, it's like so colorless, like asking those questions. Like, no, there's no age, there's no gender, there's no boundary again. So these are powerful self-inquiry questions.
Well, this is what is so beautiful about this understanding, because it self-identifies, so that it's not based on believing
Right.
someone else's statement. It's not based on a statement Rupert says, or some other teacher, or it's something that is based on what you can identify as a known experience.
Yes.
And that's the first sort of an insight. Does this awareness have a gender? Oh my God, you've just tapped into something that self-identifies. Does this awareness have a gender? When you go to that, answer that question, it takes you to awareness itself, to investigate. It takes you to the inquiry, brings you to the place that sees without opposite.
Yeah. 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 It's a powerful inquiry, and you've said those very beautifully. And again, the third one is a beautiful inquiry. Are you ever disturbed, restless, or agitated? I mean, I feel that very, very often. So to actually go, oh, my essential self, the aware physical space refers to its experience, and it looks puzzled, disturbance, restless, agitated. There is just its own endless, silent, motionless openness. And what struck me about those qualities of endless, silent was particularly the motionless, that as Rupert has a video, I never go anywhere. It's like motionless. The world, it's always moving. But this is motionless. So it doesn't change. It's consistent. It's not a thing, and it's not no thing. So anyways, that stood out for me as a quality that's very powerful.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Even the words that he's using, like silent, motionless, openness, it brings you to, and I saw that Amy mentioned today's workbook lesson 208. I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. So the peace of God is shining in me now. Or when you go back to the Old Testament and you and it speaks about be still and know that I am God. Of course, the Israelites, they projected God to be outside of them, but it was really their essence speaking to itself as itself, giving insight even 5,000 years ago but they missed it. They missed it then. And, here we are picking it back up. Jesus saw through it. And of course, they fixed him. but he actually overcame. He was such a master that he had no trouble overcoming that experience. And I'm grateful for that also. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the last of the four inquiries is, do you lack anything? And again, to me, this is another critical inquiry to ask ourselves, do I lack anything? Does my essential awareness lack? And again, a silent response. There's just the fullness of its own emptiness. It's neither something nor nothing, for there are as yet no things with which it could be qualified or contrasted. So this bringing in that there's this the analogy of what we are is complete and whole and lacks nothing. And that is what we're all looking for. And as he talks about later, ends the seeking and resisting. When we really understand there's no lack. Wow. So,
Yeah. And why there's no lack.
Yes, and why there's no lack.
Why there's no lack is because what is it that would be lacking when it's the totality of everything?
Yes. Yeah. And in our dualistic world, we're just captivated. And, you know, as this chapter explains, we're identified with the limitation, the lack.
Yes.
And that's this chapter is helping us switch our identity from the four walls in a room to the unlimited being that we are. That's a big transition.
And it takes a lot, you know, for most of us, it takes many years to when we first get a sound bite, maybe it gets our attention. We go, oh, that's an interesting idea. But then we sort of are pulled to the idea. Let me go deeper into this. Let me see what this Nisargadatta or Ramana, or let me see what this Course in Miracles is, or let me see what this teacher, this, you know, all of this, this is consciousness waking up to itself in a very profound way. Grateful for the internet coming online, because it's just caused us, this is probably what is meant by the celestial speed up. This is really a speed up experience. We're able to speak to these great teachers with these teachings all over the world in nanosecond time, and have these great book studies with hundreds of people, and discuss these ideas, bringing them online so that mainstream can pick it up. I want to go back to something that you said, Rose, that Rana picked up on when you said, I never go anywhere. Right. That's so true.
Yeah.
I never goes anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That's stunning.
That is stunning. Yes.
Stunning.
I never goes anywhere. So even when, you know, when you're the busyness of the mind is drawing you to the content of experience, this is why that resting as awareness, pausing as presence, is such a powerful thing, because it brings the isness back to itself as itself. And from there, the bodysuit experiences, it just sort of melts into the understanding, if you'll stay there only for a few seconds, and maybe you know, maybe longer, but it only takes a couple of seconds, and the peace of God envelops the experience, and now you're not so troubled.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, beautiful, Bill.
So here's where Rose, here's where he said in the bottom of the second paragraph, this is where he said, fast forward several billion years. So let's pick up on what he said in that paragraph that says, this absence of limitation, disturbance, or lack does not need to be conceptualized, for there is nothing in its experience of itself with which to contrast these qualities. Later, they will be referred to from the perspective of human experience as its innate freedom, peace, and happiness, not a freedom, peace, and happiness that are relative to their opposites, but the absolute qualities of its own nature. So he's telling us, okay, prior to planets, right? Prior to galaxies or solar systems, now he's saying fast forward several billion years to the 21st century, the same aware physical space is now populated with galaxies, stars, and planets. One of these planets is the Earth, on which are situated innumerable buildings. I mean, that's perfect.
Yes, and now he goes on to, we're making our way to one of those rooms, and now we're going to do self-inquiry of the room. Now we ask the aware physical space in the room what its name is. I, it replies, For I is, again, always the name which knows itself, gives to itself. Then we ask the aware space in the room about its experience of itself. And this is what's interesting here is now the aware space in the room looks around and says, I am small, square, limited, dark, and confined. I'm contained within these walls, defined by their shape and dependent upon them for my existence. Now that's a powerful analogy of how I experience my body is, who am I? Well, and it's all contained within this body, which determines I'm dependent on, and small and square. This is a powerful analogy. And then, of course, a hint of nostalgia in its voice betrays its faint memory of the distant past when it knew itself without any limitations. And this is his main point, to break our belief that we are a limited self.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, I'm happy that Rupert is inspired to bring chapters that focus on belief, on the idea of an ego identity, the bodysuit, to really brings us through all of these common perceptive characteristics of identity, and he just sort of takes it apart, breaks it down to the essence of its nothingness.
Yes, right on, Bill. And so then he then does inquiry with this limited space and suggests to the limited space, the aware space in the room, that it's not describing its experience of itself, but it's describing the qualities and characters of the room in which it seems to be located. I mean, this is directly my experience, and all of us, is we think that's who we are. And so it says, instead of looking at the four walls of the room, look at yourself, as we suggest to the room, and of course suggest to ourselves. Look at yourself. The space in the room, and this was really important for me, turns its attention away from the four walls of the room and gives its attention to itself. To me, that is one of the most pivotal, important lines that for me, it's like turn away, and that's what you speak about in that pause, and bring your attention back to itself. So that was a really, and you could say you could call that a choice. When we turn our attention back, we're making that choice to return to our essential self.
Okay, but wait. So I think we have to clear that statement up, because it's not we, the body mind, personal self doesn't make choice.
Right.
It's awareness. It's aware presence that is relaxing its attention on the content of experience that it made up. And
right.
it's in that relaxation of its attention is remembering, or this would be so it's not really a choice. It's a remembering. It's a relaxing into itself.
Very good point.
Because the only thing this is why, and this blew my mind for a couple of years, as Francis was saying that we don't make choices. And I'm going, what do you mean we don't make choices? I chose what to have for breakfast this morning or whatever. And then I've had the conversation with Rupert, and Rupert's really clear that it's not the bodysuit that makes choices. It's impulses. Awareness moves to the body mind, the bodysuit. It gives distinctions. It gives preferences by this impulse, and then the body mind takes credit for it and says, "Oh, I did that," but there's no I there, right. So it can only be coming from the essential self.
Right. Very good point, Bill. And later in this chapter, he says, very clearly that there's no two entities. There's only awareness. And that's where this chapter is building to have us recognize just what you were saying there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so then he says the aware physical, the last paragraph on 79, the aware physical space in the room suddenly realizes that the feeling of longing that has characterized it ever since it seemed to have been contained within the four walls of the room was not, in fact, a memory of its distance past. It was the recognition of its own essential ever-present being, which is what I hear you just saying, Bill, that we remember, we recognize
Yeah.
this, and there it is. And then he says, the aware physical space of the universe, that the ever-present being, this aware space, it was filtered through the limitations of the room with which it had mistakenly identified itself. So there's the word identity again, that false belief. So identity and belief get hooked up, and he does that again later. That we mistakenly identify with the four walls, with the body, and we get drawn back to what we really are. So I thought that was really well put by Rupert, and it meant a lot. I got a lot from his words, how he phrased that.
Yeah. 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 And then we'll change the page. We'll go to the top of 80. Did you have something to share on that?
No, it just on the top that it is, this yearning that we all feel, and it's the constant backdrop of our experience. It falls away when we have this recognition.
Yeah.
And it's innate freedom and peace. And, when you say to go to the pause, like to keep going back to our to ourselves and that innate freedom. Yeah.
Yes. And I would say that this is what happens in self-inquiry, and a lot of times you don't notice it. I think self-inquiry is happening all the time. And glimpses occur in this process of yearning, the yearning to which it had become accustomed as the almost constant backdrop of its experience falls away as an inevitable consequence of this recognition. The glimpses become more of a, at first we call them ahas or oh my God, but these glimpses are that these pieces of the construct falling away, and the recognition of our essential self is seen, and we may not know what it is for years. And then all of a sudden, a teacher like Rupert or Francis or someone would give us a description of something. Then we go, oh my God, that happened to me. Right?
Yeah, right on. That's nice. Yeah, very, very well put.
So the imaginary limitation.
Yeah. So what he does here is now hooks up the two experience of, let us relate what he's been describing, this to the experience of being a separate self or ego. The relationship between our essential nature of ever-present, unlimited awareness and the separate self or ego, which we seem to be, is analogous to the relationship between the unlimited aware physical space of the universe and the apparent confined aware space in the room. Just as the aware space in the room was the same space as the unlimited aware space in the universe, so the self of the separate self or ego is the same self as the self of awareness, albeit with an imaginary limitation attached to it. Just as the aware physical space identified with the four walls of the room within which it seemed to be contained, and as a result believed and felt that it was small, confined, and limited, likewise we awareness become mixed up or identified with the four walls of the body within which we seem to be contained, and seen, as a result, become a temporary finite self. So, and then his last paragraph on that is a very powerful summary. Instead of understanding that I, awareness, pervade the body and perceive the world through it, we believe and feel that I'm contained within, limited to, and even generated by the body. As a result, the experience I am is eclipsed by the belief I am the body. The mixture or identification of unlimited awareness with the limitations of the body creates the illusionary separate self or ego. And there's his definition of that belief, identification, and that it's a belief and it's not true.
Yeah, it becomes, I mean, and this is where teachings that describe the indescribable. It's like a paradox. How did the impossible happen? And in one word, in one sentence, you could say, well, the impossible didn't happen. This is why it's called a dream, because it's just this I think it's a pretty cool dream. You know, consciousness, presence, awareness, this total stillness made up a world of bodies, of planets, solar systems, body suits. Now we're talking to each other on Zoom. This is like, what? But it's all reasonable when you take away all that crazy stuff that we believed for so long in the different traditions, especially the Bible. The Bible really is the thing that had us way off the mark. But at least we had something. At least we were looking for something, and I'm grateful that we spent many thousands of years looking for something to hold our attention on something instead of just being barbaric. At least we had some moral, at least for sometimes we had some moral compasses. I think some of the ages of time were pretty brutal to humanity. But let's keep going. The question here, Rose, says, what is the separate self's relationship with awareness? I love the answer to this. Before we go to the answer to that, there was a question here from Andrew that said, from Noni, that said, so when individuals make choices that turn into troublesome outcomes, is it in a way noise in the wiring of the body-mind receiver of the impulses received? Boy, that's a hard one to really, I would say that it's all the activity. You know, when we keep going, you'll see that Rupert spells out what the problem is when he boils it down to three things. So the answer to that question is going to come out when Rupert answers that question on the next page. So let's stay with what is the separate self's relationship with awareness, Rose?
Well, again, like you, I love the answer here, and it's the temporary finite self does not, of course, exist in its own right. And this is a stunning teaching that we think there's a separate self, and that's what this chapter is about. Is we believe it's actually a Rose and a Bill and countless, and it does not exist in its own right, any more than the aware space in the room exists separate from or independent of the aware physical space of the universe. It is simply a belief, albeit a persistent and a powerful one, that's for sure. But that analogy that he's taken us through, that we can really relate to the space in the room and the four walls, and that our space in this body in the world and how we identify with the walls of our body, there are not two separate selves. So nor can we say, the last paragraph, nor can we say that a relationship exists between awareness and the separate self or ego, because there are not two entities in the first place. Just as the aware physical space in the universe and the room are not two separate spaces. The latter, again, he emphasizes, is simply an imaginary limitation of the former. So we imagine this limitation and we pretend that we're a body, and that's why it's imaginary. Imagination is pretending.
Yeah. And we're trying to understand through the finite mind and the filter that we've been that these bodysuits have been using for a long time, and recent understanding from the teachings of different teachers like Rupert and Francis, Ramana, and Krishnamurti, the Course in Miracles. We're starting to see things differently. And I was listening to a conversation or an interview that Rick Archer, Buddha at the Gas Pump, had with Donald Hoffman yesterday, and it's like the ideas that we know today, because Donald Hoffman is a professor of cognitive psychology at UCLA, and he is a graduate of MIT. He's a brilliant scientist. And for him to say that the things that we understand today are giving us the limitations of our own ideas today, and you 100 years or in moving fast forwarding to the future, there's probably going to be science that's going to bend time, that's going to warp time and space. And so the things that we think are remarkable and astonishing today, even by the human that the human body mind system can do, is going to be eclipsed by the things that we're going to know 100 years from now. So fasten your seatbelt, Rose.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at this next question on page 81. It says, is it possible to live and act in the world without the feeling of being a separate self or ego? I'm afraid that if I let go of myself as a separate self, I'll no longer be able to function properly or have relationships. I've heard that so many times. I've heard statements like that. I love Rupert's answer. And this is where this answers that question that someone had a few minutes ago, because he says the sense of being a separate self is responsible for the three aspects of our life: unhappiness on the inside, conflict between individuals, communities, and nations on the outside, and the exploitation and degradation of the environment. Feeling itself to be a fragment, the separate self feels incomplete and unfulfilled, giving rise to almost constant activity and seeking and resisting. That is, the ego is the source of all psychological suffering.
Yeah, that's pretty important paragraph right there, where he goes on in later chapters about, the origin of suffering and all of that. And here it is, right here, the origin of this belief in our separation is the origin. And we'll be seeing that more and more in the upcoming chapters. So his description here of really helping us understand the illusionary, imaginary association of who we are with the body and the world is the source of what Bill just read: our unhappiness on the inside, our conflict with each other, and our relationship with the planet. This is big news. Like, this is why Rupert, he's amazing in how he's sharing this, that he says later, this is our survival as a species, not that that's the most important thing. Our realization is the most important thing, and it depends on our realization, is what I hear Rupert saying here.
Yeah. And there's some comments on the chat, Rose, from Noni, and I just really appreciate you all for commenting back to Noni, and also some of the add-on statements that are being made for what we're discussing here. But Noni had a question. So when individuals make choices that turn in. Oh, that was the thing that I had that I read a few minutes ago. And then Amy said, no, Noni, nothing is a troublesome outcome except as interpreted by the egoic mind that thinks it is control and that things should go this way. And Rana said, watch the term troublesome. it just is not good or bad. True. Totally true. So, and then Rick said, glimpses on their effect are not always known in real time. They occur outside of time and may only be noticed much later, if at all. What's remembered may not be the actual glimpse. It can't be put into words, but the mind may develop a story or belief to explain it. What is actually remembered, it's the side effects on your body, mind, life, etc. Well, I think you could go into that as a, that's, you just don't know what glimpses to me are moments of realization. It's what the Course would call a miracle. It's what I think they're moments of recognition of self-identity. And you're right, Rick. I don't think you don't, the body mind doesn't actually know what's going on, because it's that realization where the space in the room is no longer contained by the walls. It's just the transparency of all things is seen for that momentary glimpse experience. And thankfully, that seems to be the thing that causes us to search, to look, to say, oh, there was something there. There was that intuition or that insight that caused us to want to pick up a book or join, something that is helping us to remember what we are. Where did we leave off here?
We on page 81, he says that, and just as the aware physical space in the room feels itself as an independently existing space, cut off and separate from all other spaces in the universe, so the separate self feels separate from everyone else. The aware space of the room is, of course, the same space as all other apparent spaces, but it does not know it. That's a key phrase right there, our ignorance. And self-realization is getting out of ignorance, that we do know that we're complete and whole, and we are the same space as the aware being, or some call it God, whatever you want to call that. So likewise, the separate self or ego does not realize that it shares its being with all other people and animals, giving rise to the feelings of isolation, envy, greed, injustice, cruelty, and so on. As such, the ego is the main source of all conflict. So he's really narrowing it down to our belief of who we are as a body with limitations.
Well, and when you say that, we're spending a lot of time or a lot of words. Rupert's spending a lot of words here talking about the ego. He's really talking about our fixed identity as this.
Yes.
Our fixed identity. We think we're this, and it's I am, the I that thinks it's this, and attaching its identity to it. And now we're away, we're away at the races. We're just, we're doing our thing with the power of the universe is now at large in this bodysuit. Right?
Yeah. That's very well said. A very good summary, Bill. That we are identified. That's the word, or we believe. And that's what causes the problem.
Yeah. Jenny said at 12:54 in answer to Noni's statement or question. Noni, individuals don't make choices. Choices happen. They come from patterns in the activity of awareness. We experience those patterns as habits in specific body minds. There is no person making a choice, good or bad. And if you could copy and paste that and drop it in a Word document, that's a refrigerator statement right there. That's perfectly said. Thank you, Jenny, for that. And then Rana said, now rest as awareness when those situations are noticed. Yes. Just no matter what it is, pause as presence, rest as awareness. Just, because this is the resolution. It's be still and know I am. And that resolves the energy that thinks that it's separate from itself. It's a self-resolving. It's so beautiful and it's so amazing that we either don't see it or we don't believe it or we miss it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. To rest as awareness, be still and know. And that resolves. That's really beautiful. Yeah.
So Pat, wait a minute. Patty James says, so when I constantly want to know why there is suffering, this is an ego question or not? What is the evolution of all there is? Well, I would say that's almost two questions. When you constantly want to know why there is suffering, I would, just allow that question to be there. Patty has that question. No problem. You can't eventually, if you don't touch it, if you don't log into it, if you don't try to find the answer, the question will it'll melt into the nothingness that it is. And then, of course, it's all the questions are ego questions. What is the evolution of all there is? There's really no evolution of all there is. There's only is. What were you going to say, Rose?
No, that was good, Bill. Just, that in terms of suffering that we all experience in duality, that's inevitable in the difference. Like the way I think of that is we are different, and different has to have more or less. So we're always going to experience the more or less, and we're going to experience the less the suffering, and we're going to experience the more the everything. And it goes like this, in motion.
Yeah.
So that's what this is, taking us out of duality. And when we go back to that experience of awareness that is not in subject-object relationship, is a unique experience and does, as you were saying, and others, resolve that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's why belief is such an important concept, that I put my trust in the limitation. And my journey is now to put my trust, my belief in what's really true, and resolves that up-down movement of differences.
Yeah.
That it's just going to happen constantly. So that's how I see that.
Yeah. Thank you. Jenny mentioned at 105, answering Patty, suffering follows on from ignorance, the belief in being a separate entity. It is the activity or play of awareness. There's no evolution of awareness. Yeah, there it is.
Motionless.
Yeah, it's the isness, and that's too many words. Yeah, Rick says, simply abide or rest as I am, full stop. Eventually, we have to learn how to simply stop, 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 be still. Very difficult if you're not stopped. That's so funny. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just, I think we have a few more minutes left. How would you end this here?
Well, I would go to the very last paragraph on 81, and then the short paragraph on the last page, where Rupert is really telling us that all of our suffering on an individual, our unhappiness, our conflict with others, our exploiting the planet, comes from this separate belief in lack and how we are always searching and needing. So the last paragraph, lastly, the ego does not realize that at the deepest level, it shares its own being, not only with everyone, but with everything. This belief with the felt sense of oneness with all of nature, thereby enabling it to exploit, consume, and degrade the natural world with no regard for the consequences. So that happens inside when we believe that we're separate and in lack and not complete. We're unhappy. We put that into our relationships, and we put that on the planet.
Yeah.
So then we're on page 82 in his last paragraph, where he is really asking us to evolve beyond this separate sense of separation or ego. So do you want to read that, Bill?
Sure. He says, therefore, if we as individuals in particular, and as a society in general, wish to be at peace and to live happy, creative, and fulfilled lives, if we wish to have harmonious relationships with friends, family, and strangers, irrespective of whether or not we agree with their ideas, and if we wish to live in a harmonious and sustainable relationship with nature, one thing alone is required: to evolve beyond the sense of separation or ego. And that's it. And that is what's happening. That's what's occurring. I'm so grateful that it's happening in this lifetime, and started the search early enough to really be hungry for the answer. And finding the answer in these teachings is like, it's the icing on the cake in living life in the freedom that's offered through liberation, through self-realization. We get to experience our true nature by the understanding that is revealed in these teachings. Awesome.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Rose. This was a great session with you today. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your comments or for joining us today. This was a great time that we've been able to look at this chapter together. I look forward to next week. Jenny Beal will be back. And like I said at the beginning, she and I, we covered There Is Only One Self for a full year. We did it every month. And she's a great friend, and she's a great contribution to the book study, and in my mind, she's the brightest light here. She's just amazing. Thank you, Jenny, for your comments. Thank you, Rick, for yours, and everyone else for yours. And we'll see you next week for chapter 11.
Thanks, everyone.